Hello, darlings. Today I'm going to talk about a topic that may revolutionize how you view relationships, especially the romantic ones. And hopefully, by becoming aware of these stages or relationship phases, you can learn how to navigate through them and build more fulfilling and long lasting relationships. These stages are common to almost all relationships, whether they are romantic or not, but especially the romantic ones, because they're some of the most intimate relationships we can have. Nonetheless, these phases can be experienced with friends, coworkers, roommates, co-founders, in-laws, or just anyone you meet and end up wanting to have a relationship with. These relationship stages may not strictly apply to family members or anyone you grew up with, just because of the unavoidable history and familiar bond you already share with them. But if you have been constantly fighting or arguing with your romantic partner, boyfriend, husband, this podcast is right for you. Just like if you are someone who is constantly looking for love but can't seem to find it and commit to anyone, as this will give you some clues as to why this is happening to you. There are essentially 5 different stages of relationships, which are the honeymoon stage, the power struggle stage, the stability stage, the commitment and interdependence stage, and the bliss and shared purpose stage. Please note that those 5 relationship stages are not linear. They're more like a spiral, cycling, and coexisting process. So let's talk about the first stage, which is called the honeymoon phase. The honeymoon stage is the initial sweeping romance that often consumes us when we first get together and meet that one person we click with, have chemistry with, or share some sort of bond. This happens when we first meet that person who we really liked and we began getting to know them. And in romantic relationships, we begin feeling an all-consuming joy in the presence of our partner. Often, people in this stage of a relationship feel as if they found their perfect match, soulmate, someone who is so similar and compatible with them. They feel they always want to be together, and having boundaries is not something that we have in our minds then. And the two seem to merge together, or at least feel eager to do so. Eventually, the emotions often take over the rational side of our brains. That is because on this first stage, especially when it comes to romantic relationships, it is marked by biochemical changes in our brain. It's like a cocktail of hormones that trigger and maintain a state of infatuation. And so hormones like dopamine, oxytocin, and endorphins began being released, and this glow can often lead us to become addicted to our partners, which leads us to ignore incompatibilities, red flags, or other issues. This also happens to a much lesser extent with friends and other relationships. This mainly happens in romantic relationships. This release of hormones. This initial stage can take anywhere from 2 months to 2 years to happen. And funny enough, when it comes to romantic partnerships, nature needed a way to ensure that we reproduce and ensure the survival of our species, of course, which encourage us to bond, but not with just anyone. Very often, we end up falling in love with someone who appears to be the most incompatible person for us. And because this person usually has complementary traits to our own, let's say one person is more analytical and the other is more nurturing, those traits compensate for our weaknesses and vice versa. And there is a natural explanation to this because when the two of us combine, the sum of our differences form a unit more resistant than each of us as an individual. And a strong unit is more likely to survive and ensure the continuation of the species than if we were on our own. But we also look for relationships where we share things in common. And that's what we tend to focus on this stage. And because of that, we often tend to ignore difficult questions or see all of our partner's flaws. Also, when it comes to romantic relationships, because when we talk about other relationships, this happens with a much lesser extent, we tend to seek a more permanent bond with that person on this stage by dating exclusively, wanting to see that person often, moving in together, getting engaged, married, pregnant, wanting to meet their parents, or anything that symbolizes permanence to us. However, this very exciting and all-consuming stage doesn't last long. And so we get to the following stage, which is called the power struggle stage. And that's when reality sets in. This stage often begins to creep in slowly during our relationships, but will sometimes happen all at once. This is often where relationships end because one person or both decide they've made a mistake in their selection. Because that is when we start to see the flaws in the other person or behaviors we don't like. It's not that we are no longer in love or infatuated, but our partner doesn't seem to be as great as he or she was in the first stage. We start getting to know the person better and seeing them as who they really are without masks and hormones to blind us, pretty much. And because the honeymoon stage features many endorphins running through our bodies that gives us that high sensation, our bodies can't keep this up forever. And so our infatuation began to level off. And we began wondering if we are still in love and began missing that fantasy that we had before. This can be a very difficult time for us to go through, especially when it comes to romantic relationships, because this can also be very consuming and it can bring a lot of hurt feelings and sadness and frustrations. And by the way, those who are addicted to love, who are serial daters and can't commit often, leave at this stage because it is hard. And what happens is They move on to the next person and the next person, hoping to find a more compatible mate, only to discover that the same patterns re-emerge in their next relationships over and over and over again. And the power struggle phase can often be the end of relationships, also because many people don't discuss deal breakers during the honeymoon stage. And so topics like having kids, financial situations, lifestyle choices can often creep in and can really make a relationship unattainable. And another point that I'd like to mention here is that we often feel attracted to those partners that trigger our traumas, and that can be healthy or not, because it can help us face those traumas and overcome them if we are aware of them, if we are aware of what's happening, right? Or it can really be a bad relationship as a whole. And I will talk more about this subject on a later date. So don't hesitate to subscribe to the Church of Clear podcast, okay? And so in order to graduate from this stage, it is very important that the two persons learn to communicate and understand their traumas. And if you haven't done so yet, check out our podcast here on this channel on how to be better parents, partner, etc. Because I explain what we can do to make our relationships better, as well as the one named Let's Talk About Traumas, as we all have them, so you know what I mean here. The problem with people and their relationships is that they believe that arguments are bad, and that's one very important point too. Or like conflicts are bad. But that couldn't be further from the truth. The more we learn how to deal with conflicts, which will inevitably exist, and overcome them, then stronger we make our relationships. And so this stage, some of the anger can be over trivial things such as small differences between the two persons. And since most people don't realize that conflict can be healthy, they wonder if this relationship is doomed. In fact, you likely have thoughts of breaking up or getting divorced very often. And if you're going through this stage, you know how difficult, stressful, and all-consuming it can be. And without a strong communication, trust, and the ability to work as a team, the two persons are unlikely to advance past the next stage. This stage can actually last a lifetime if we don't learn to do so. If it doesn't end before that, of course. However, if you are able to get past the power struggle stage, which can seem very hard sometimes, like getting past those hurt feelings can be pretty hard. And if your relationship has survived, you graduate to the stability stage. This next stage actually offers much rest and enjoyment. The stability stage can last for roughly 2 years, and we begin feeling more stable as we have been able to work through some of our differences, and we now share a history together, and the fantasy of stage 1 is almost completely gone, but we have accepted this. And yes, we all have our differences, and then we see that, we sometimes fight with our partner, but we love our partner and we feel connected to him or her, and we trust we can work through any future conflicts because we've learned how to fight in a way that both of us win, and that's very important. We may, however, feel a little bored at times as the chase is kind of over. So it is important to make efforts to spice it up, especially when it comes to romantic relationships, because that kind of keeps the spark alive. And we may also miss the stage one feelings and wonder if those feelings can be found in someone else. That often happens too. However, if we stick around, we will begin getting into a much deeper relationship. One that can be very fulfilling, one that is more mature, and one that many people don't even get to experience. And in the stability stage, it also becomes very clear that we're not going to succeed in changing our partner, only if he or she really wants to change, and that has to come from the other person. And we often give up trying to. And then we also feel okay that our partner is different from us. We both also realize that we need clear boundaries and we need to learn mutual respect. And if we don't do that, the hurtful patterns of the power struggle stage will keep haunting us. And if things keep progressing, we will be able to experience the commitment and interdependence stage. This stage has nothing to do with getting married. It is just when we fully surrender to the reality that us and our partner are humans, and that this relationship will have shortcomings as a result. All relationships take work and effort, and we are okay with that. We've learned to love each other's flaws and all, and we choose each other consciously. That's very important because it becomes also a matter of choosing that person, because we end up realizing that we don't need our partner, but we choose our partner, knowing all we know about him or her. And there is a good amount of trust, understanding, and support, and we begin to experience a beautiful balance of love, belonging, fun, power, and freedom. However, don't think that all of the work in this relationship is done. It is important to maintain the emotional connection and not let the independent side of this stage rule the show so that you begin feeling disconnected. The opposite can also happen, like spending too much time together, that you sacrifice your own personal goals, and that won't be healthy either. An interesting fact regarding romantic relationship here in the commitment and interdependence stage is that this is the only stage where we're actually ready to get married. And a lot of us get married in the honeymoon stage when we're high on, our hormones, which we can call it drugs, and before we've learned to navigate through conflict. And that's why so many marriages end up in divorce these days. And so, once we begin realizing that our work in the world as a couple is just beginning, we are then ready to move to the fifth and final stage, which is the bliss and shared purpose stage. On this stage, our relationship evolves beyond the boundaries of our family unit and moves out into the world. This is an advanced stage that very few people get to experience, unfortunately. This can be a very beautiful stage because the relationship gets to a deeper level that is rarely seen out there. I normally call this stage as the relationship unicorn, because that's when ours and our partner's soul begin joining together, and the desire to give back to the world is emerged, or there is a desire to do something bigger than ourselves with that other person. It's like the two persons are naturally called to give back to society in some way. And often, couples in this stage work on a collaborative project together or a purpose. And it's usually some kind of shared creative work that is intended to make the world a better place. This project could be anything from like a business venture, a charity, an artwork, or consciously raising a child. Neither of us would have been able to dream up this project on our own. It is something that naturally emerges as the joint force that we share with the other person, and the result of us growing through all the stages together. So that's it for today, darlings. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. And before I leave, I just wanted to mention that we are building a community and we need your help. We are accepting donations to help us make the world a better place and have spaces where we can all meet and hang out online and offline. So please visit our website at churchofclear.org if you'd like to help us and our cause. We hope to see you again on the next podcast. Have a beautiful day. Goodbye.